Welcome to Crescendo, your program for the performing arts. Crescendo is a production of international artists in New York, Seattle, and Lumberton. Thank you for joining us.
Well, it's certainly my honor to be here today. I want to thank each one of you for coming. And I want to welcome you to this magnificent display of talent by Mark Anderson and his entourage. In case you didn't know, Mark and I went to grade school together. I was honored to be a part of his Crescendo performance in 2018, which was nominated and received the Golden Trim Award. He's very talented, his entire entourage is very talented, and it's such a pleasure to listen and more of a pleasure to be here for a few minutes to tell you that the city of Lumberton is working hard to complete our recovery efforts from those hurricanes. Enjoy today, and thank you.
There's Christmas in the air, colored lights twinkle everywhere. La 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 la. The bells do brightly ring, and the carolers sweetly sing. La 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 la.
Here we come a-wassailing among the leaves so green. Here we come a-wandering so fair to be seen.
Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail too. And God bless you and send you a happy new year. And God send you a happy new year. Our wassail cup is made of the rosemary tree, and so is your beer of the best barley. Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail too. And God bless you and send you a happy new year. And God send you a happy new year. We are not daily beggars that beg from door to door, but we are neighbors' children who you have seen before. Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail too. And God bless you and send you a happy new year. And God send you a happy new year. We bless the master of this house, likewise the mistress too, and all the little children that round the table go. Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail too. And God bless you and send you a happy new year. And God send you a happy new year.
Good master and good mistress, while we're sitting by the fire, pray think of us for children who are wandering in the mire.
Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail too. And God bless you and send you a happy new year. And God send you a happy new year. Ding dong merrily on high, the Christmas bells are ringing. Ding dong, heaven up we fly, with angel voices singing. Sing glory to the highest. Sing glory to the highest. When a poor man came inside, gathered winter fuel. Ding dong, mercy on high, the Christmas bells are ringing. Windows will lay round, and angel voices singing. Sing glory to the highest. Sing glory to the highest.
Jonathan Toomey. And though it's not polite to call people names, this one fit quite well, for Jonathan Toomey seldom smiled and never laughed. He went about mumbling and grumbling, muttering and sputtering, grumping and griping. He complained that the church bells rang too often, that the birds sang too shrilly, and the children played too loudly. Mr. Toomey was a woodcarver. Some said he was the best woodcarver in the whole valley. He spent his days sitting at a workbench, carving beautiful shapes from blocks of pine and hickory and chestnut wood. After supper, he sat in a straight-backed chair near the fireplace, smoking his pipe and staring into the flames. Jonathan Toomey wasn't an old man, but if you saw him, you might think he was. The way he walked, bent forward with his head down, you wouldn't notice his eyes, the clear blue of an August sky, and you wouldn't see the dimple on his chin, since his face was mostly hidden under a shaggy, untrimmed beard, speckled with sawdust and wood shavings, and depending on what he ate that day, bits of crumbs or bits of potato and gravy. The village people didn't know it, but there was a reason for his gloom, a reason for his grumbling. A reason why he walked hunched over as if carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Some years earlier, Jonathan Toomey was young and full of life, full of love. His wife and baby, though, had become very sick. And because those were the days before hospitals and medicines and skilled doctors, his wife and baby died 3 days apart from each other. So Jonathan Toomey had packed his belongings into a wagon and travelled until his tears stopped. He settled into a tiny house at the edge of the village to do his wood carving. One day early in December, there was a knock at Jonathan's door. Mumbling and grumbling, he went to answer it. There stood a woman and a young boy. "I'm the widow McDowell, I know in your village. This is my son Thomas," the woman said. "I'm 7 and I know how to whistle," said Thomas. "Whistling is pish posh," said the woodcarver gruffly. "I need something carved," said the woman, and she told Jonathan about a very special set of Christmas figures her grandfather had carved for her when she was a young girl. "After I moved here, I discovered that they were lost," she explained. "I'd hoped by some miracle I could find them again, but it hasn't happened." "There's no such thing as miracles," the woodcarver told her. "Now would you describe the figures for me?" "Well, they were sheep," she told him. "2 of them with carry wool," said Thomas. "Yes, 2, said the widow. "And a cow, an angel, Mary and Joseph, the baby Jesus, and the wise men." 3 of them, said Thomas. "Will you take the job?" asked the widow McDowell. "I will." "And grateful. How soon can you have them ready?" "They will be ready when they are ready," he said. "But I must have them by Christmas. They mean so very much to me, I can't remember a Christmas without them." "Christmas is pish posh," said Jonathan gruffly, and he shut the door. The following week there was a knock at the woodcarver's door. Muttering and sputtering, he went to answer it. There stood the widow McDowell and Thomas. "Excuse me," said the widow, "but Thomas has been begging to come and watch you work. He says he wants to be a woodcarver when he grows up, and he'd like to watch you since you're the best in the valley." "I'll be quiet, you won't even know I'm there. Please, please," piped in Thomas. With a grumble, the woodcarver stepped aside and let them in. He pointed to a stool near the workbench. "No talking, no jiggling, no noise," he ordered Thomas. The widow McDowell handed Mr. Toomey a warm loaf of cornbread as a token of thanks. She took out her knitting and sat down in a rocking chair at the far corner of the cottage. "Not there," bellowed the woodcarver. "No one sits in that chair." So she moved to a straight-back chair by the fire. Thomas sat very still. Once, when he needed to sneeze, he pressed a finger under his nose to hold it back. But after a very long time, Thomas cleared his throat and whispered, "Mr. Toomey, can I ask you a question?" The woodcarver glared at Thomas and shrugged his shoulders and grunted. Thomas decided it meant yes, so he went on, "Is that my sheep you're carrying?" The woodcarver glared at Thomas and shrugged his shoulders and grunted. After another very long time, Thomas whispered, "Mr. Toomey, excuse me, but you're carving my shape wrong." The widow McDowell's knitting needle stopped clicking. Jonathan Toomey's knife stopped carving. Thomas went on, "It's a beautiful shape, nice and curly, but my sheep looked happy." "That's pish posh," said Mr. Toomey. "Sheep are sheep, they cannot look happy." "Mine did," said Thomas. "They knew they were with the baby Jesus, so they were very happy." After that, Thomas was quiet for the rest of the afternoon. When the church bells chimed 6 o'clock, Mr. Toomey grumbled under his breath about the awful noise, and the widow McDowell said it was time to leave. That evening, after a supper of cornbread and boiled potatoes, the woodcarver sat at his bench. He picked up his knife, he picked up the sheep, and he worked until his eyelids drooped shut. A few days later, there was a knock at the woodcarver's door. Grumping and griping, he went to answer it. There stood the widow and her son. "May I watch again, or be quiet?" said Thomas. He settled himself on the bench very quietly, while his mother laid a basket of sweet-smelling raisin buns on the table. "The teapot is warm," Mr. Toomey said gruffly, his head bent over his work. While Mr. Toomey carved Widow McDowell poured tea, she touched the woodcarver gently on the shoulder and placed a cup of tea and a bun next to him. He pretended not to notice, but soon the plate and the cup were empty. Thomas tried to eat his bun that his mother had given him as quietly as he could, but it's almost impossible to be 7 and eat a warm, sticky raisin bun without making various smacking and licking satisfied noises. But when Thomas had finished, he tried to sit quietly. Once he almost hiccuped, but he took a deep breath and held it until his face turned red. The glare from the woodcarver stopped him, and he held himself so still he nearly fell asleep. After a very long time, Thomas whispered, "Mr. Toomey, may I ask a question?" "Grant." "Is that my cow you're carrying?" "Nod." "Grant." After another very long time, Thomas cleared his throat and said, "Mr. Toomey, excuse me, but I must tell you something. Those are very beautiful cows. It's the most beautiful cow I've ever seen. But it's not right. My cow looked proud." "That's pish posh," said the woodcarver. "Cows are cows. They cannot look proud." "My cow did. It knew Jesus was going to be born in its barn, so it was very proud." Thomas was quiet for the rest of the afternoon. The only sounds that could be heard were the scraping of the carving knife, the humming of the widow McDowell, and the click-click of the knitting needles. When the church bells chimed 6 o'clock, Mr. Toomey muttered under his breath about the noise. The widow McDowell said it was time to leave, and Thomas thanked the woodcarver for allowing him to watch. That evening, after a supper of boiled potatoes and raisin buns, the woodcarver sat down at his bench. He picked up the carving knife, he picked up the cow, and he worked until his eyelids drooped shut. A few days later, there was a knock at the woodcarver's door. He smoothed down his hair, then went to answer it. At the door were the widow and her son. "May I watch again?" asked Thomas. As Mrs. McDowell warmed the tea and put a plate of fresh molasses cookies on the workbench, Thomas watched the woodcarver work on the figure of an angel. After a very long time, Thomas spoke. "Mr. Toomey, excuse me, is that my angel you're carrying?" "Yes. And would you do me the favour of telling me exactly what I'm doing wrong?" "Well, my angel looked like one of God's most important angels because it was sent to the baby Jesus. And just how does one make an angel look important?" asked the woodcarver. "I'll be able to do it," said Thomas. "You're the best woodcarver in the valley." After another very long time, Thomas wrote, "Mr. Toomey, excuse me, may I ask you a question? Do you ever stop talking?" "My mother says I don't. She says I could learn a lot about the virtue of silence from you." Under his beard, the woodcarver's face turned pink. The widow McDowell's face turned as red as the red scarf she was knitting. "Well, speak up. What's your question?" "Would you please teach me to carve?" "I'm a very busy man," grumbled the woodcarver, but he put down the important angel. "You will carve a bird." "A robin, I hope," said Thomas. "I like robins." With a piece of charcoal, the woodcarver sketched a robin on a piece of brown paper. He handed Thomas a small block of pine and a knife. He showed him how to lop the corners from the block and slowly smooth the edges into curves. Thomas copied the woodcarver's stroke, head bent, tongue working side to side on his lower lip as he concentrated. When the church bells chimed 6 o'clock, Jonathan Toomey was holding Thomas's hand in his, guiding the knife along the edge of a wing. He didn't hear them ringing. The widow McDowell said it was time to leave. Thomas reached out and brushed 2 especially large pieces of wood shaving from Jonathan Toomey's beard. He thanked the woodcarver for teaching him how to carve. Later, after a supper of boiled potatoes and molasses cookies, Jonathan Toomey went to his workbench. He thought for a long time. He sketched drawing after drawing. Finally, he picked up his carving knife. He picked up the angel, and he carved until his eyelids drooped shut. A few days later, there was a knock on the woodcarver's door. Mr. Toomey jumped up to answer it. There stood the widow McDowell with with a bouquet of pine boughs and holly sprigs, and there stood Thomas clutching his partly carved robin. While Thomas and Mr. Toomey carved, Mrs. McDowell put the branches in a jar of water. She scrubbed Mr. Toomey's kitchen table and set the jar in the centre. On a pretty cloth embroidered with lilies of the valley, which she found in a drawer below the cupboard. Next, I will carve the wise men and Joseph, the woodcarver said to Thomas. Perhaps, before I begin, you will tell me all the mistakes I'm going to make. Well, said Thomas, my wise men were wearing the most wonderful robes because they were going to visit Jesus, and my Joseph was leaning over baby Jesus like he was protecting him. He looked very serious. It wasn't until the church bells had chimed that Mr. Toomey saw the jar of pine branches and cloth embroidered with lily of the valley. I found the cloth in a drawer and I thought it would look pretty on the table, the widow McDowell said, smiling. Never open that drawer, the woodcarver said harshly. When the two had left, Jonathan folded the cloth and put it back in the drawer below the cupboard. That evening, after a supper of boiled potatoes, the woodcarver worked on Joseph and the wise man until his eyelids drooped shut. A few days later, there was a knock on the woodcarver's door. He dusted the crumbs from his beard and brushed the sawdust from his shirt. At the door were the widow McDowell and Thomas. All afternoon, Thomas watched the woodcarver work. When it was time to leave, Jonathan said to Thomas, I'm about to begin the last two figures, Mary and the baby. Can you tell me how your figures looked? They were the most important of all, said Thomas. Jesus was smiling and reaching up to his mother, and Mary looked like she loved him very much. Thank you, Thomas, said the woodcarver. Tomorrow is Christmas. Is there any chance the figures will be ready? The widow McDowell asked. They will be ready when we are ready. I understand, said the widow. And she thanked Jonathan and handed him 2 packages. Merry Christmas, she said. Jonathan folded his arms across his chest. I want no presents, he said harshly. That is exactly why we are giving them, answered the widow. She put them on the table and left. Jonathan sat down at the table. Slowly, he opened the first package. Inside was a red scarf, hand-knit, warm and bright. He tied the scarf around his neck. The other parcel held a robin, crudely carved of pine. A smile twitched at the corners of Jonathan's mouth as he ran his fingers over the lopsided wings. He dusted the fireplace mantle with his sleeve and placed the robin exactly in the center so he could look at it from his chair. The woodcarver did not eat supper that day. Instead, he began to sketch the final figures, Mary and Jesus. He drew Mary, and then wadded the sketch into a ball and tossed it onto the floor. He drew the baby, wadded the sketch into a ball and tossed it onto the floor with the first. He sketched again and again, and soon there was a small mountain of crumpled papers at his feet. He picked up a block of wood and tried to carve, but the knife wouldn't do what he wanted it to do. He hurled the chunk of wood into the fireplace and sat staring into the flames. When he heard the church bells announcing midnight Christmas service, he got up. Slowly, he opened the drawer beneath the cupboard, the drawer he told the widow never to open. From it, he took the cloth, embroidered with lily of the valley. He took out a rough woolen shawl and a lace handkerchief. He took out a tiny white baby blanket and a little pair of blue socks. He placed each item gently on the floor. From the bottom of the drawer, he lifted out a picture frame, beautifully carved, of deep brown chestnut wood. In the frame was a charcoal sketch of a woman sitting in a rocking chair, holding a baby. The baby's arms were reaching up, touching the woman's face. The woman was looking down at the baby, smiling. Jonathan sat down in his rocking chair and held the picture against his chest. He rocked slowly, his eyes closed. 2 tears trailed into his beard. When he finally took the picture to his workbench and began to carve, his fingers worked quickly and surely, and he carved all through the night. The next day there was a knock at the widow McDowell's door. When she opened it, there stood the woodcarver, his neck wrapped in a red scarf, holding a wooden box stuffed with straw. Mr. Toomey, said the widow, what a surprise! Merry Christmas! The figures are ready, he said, stepping inside. From the box, Jonathan unpacked 2 curly sheep, happy sheep, because they were with Jesus. He unpacked a proud cow and an angel, a very important angel with mighty wings stretching from his shoulders right down the most wonderful robes edged with fur and full of rich folds. He unpacked 3 wise men, beautiful clothing, beautiful gifts. He unpacked a serious and carried Joseph. He unpacked Mary wearing a rough woolen shawl, looking down, loving her precious baby son. Jesus was smiling and reaching up to touch his mother's face. That day, Jonathan went to church service with the widow McDowell and Thomas. And that day, in the churchyard, the village children saw Jonathan throw back his head, showing his eyes as clear blue as an August sky, and laugh. And no one ever called him Mr. Gloomy again.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Crescendo. We hope to see you next time.